This story began with a strong, abnormal thunderstorm that thundered over the buildings of the night city. Panic spread among the children and adults in the buildings and on the streets, out of fear and confusion about what was happening. Some speculated that it might be an earthquake or a storm. Panic and fear grew with each passing minute, until the power went out in one of the shops where the frightened people were, and on top of that, the lights went out. Holding his breath in the darkness and listening to every sound, one of the frightened shopkeepers suddenly felt moisture on his shoulder. Drops of water were falling on him from above. In surprise, the man looked up and froze in place, a giant monster towering over him. Its bright red eyes glowed in the darkness, and a long tongue stuck out of its gaping toothy mouth, dripping with foul saliva. The man screamed in fear, but it was too late to run away, as he heard the horrible sounds of tearing flesh, crunching bones, snapping jaws, and the moaning of a dying man in the darkness. It all happened suddenly, and the other visitors to the store didn't even have time to get their bearings and come to the rescue. They only heard terrible sounds and only later could see in the darkness 3 bloodthirsty monsters bending over the victim's body, eating the remains of the unfortunate man's flesh. Even more panic ensued. People scattered in different directions, screaming in fear, but the monsters caught them and killed them on the spot. Once again, screams, pleas, and the crunching of bones could be heard from all corners. Some people managed to escape from the monsters and get out of the building unharmed. One of the lucky ones ran outside where he saw bright, giant lightning bolts shining over the city in dazzling flashes and a bunch of people watching in amazement at the terrifying phenomenon. Lightning was everywhere, striking directly into the roofs of houses and skyscrapers, and there was a terrible roar. The first thing that came to people's minds was that the world had come to an end. As it became known later, such abnormal thunderstorms occurred simultaneously in different parts of the world. The buildings that were struck by lightning later turned into lairs of terrible monsters. Such places were called dungeons. Many countries began sending military units there to assess potential threats and gather information. But conventional weapons proved ineffective against the monsters. In the end, even the army was unable to overcome these anomalies, and every time the military was defeated in battles with monsters. Humanity was beginning to lose all hope, but suddenly there were those who could save everyone. Another attempt by the soldiers to defeat the monsters failed, with a fire burning around them and exhausted soldiers standing there. As if from nowhere, a stranger appeared, ordered the soldiers to retreat, and took out a mysterious map and held it up, shouting, "Brahma, the Red Knight, appear!" The map flew into the air and began to emit a bright light, and a majestic knight in silver armor with a sword materialized from the map. The knight instantly rushed into battle with the monster. Everything was on fire, and the sounds of battle were heard. The knight defeated the monstrous creature with a few clear sword strokes. These strangers called themselves the Awakened Ones, and the mysterious cards they used during the battle were called the Gate cards. The cards were deliberately developed in secret laboratories by scientists who had predicted the appearance of the dungeons in advance. Soon, one by one, the Awakened began to appear, those who could control the power of the card. The Awakened successfully defeated the monsters of the dungeons and became national heroes. Over time, companies even appeared that cooperated with the Awakened and built a business of clearing the dungeons of monsters. As a result, in a world where dungeons posed the greatest threat to people every day, the Awakened became the elite of society. A guy named Okita Hikaru is one of the Awakened. For 3 years in a row, he has been working for a company that cleans the dungeons. His father was brutally killed by a monster, and his mother was hospitalized. He was left with only his younger sister, and they did not understand how to cope on their own. That's why Okita decided to take the test and find out if he could become an Awakened One. Okita was in an empty room, in the middle of which stood a strange elongated device, similar to a pedestal. The device emitted a light glow, and a map was placed on top. It seems that this device was used to determine the level of power of the Awakened One. A voice from the speakers ordered the boy to come closer and put his hand to the device. Okita held out his trembling hand to begin testing. The scientists, who were outside the room watching the test, decided that the boy was not a good match for them because the device did not show any reaction to the card. Suddenly, the numbers on the monitor changed and the device's scales showed the lowest score they had ever seen. Despite this, he was still issued an awakened license and assigned the lowest rank. The license issued to Okita Hikaru had a bright yellow letter with the rank F- on it. Although Okita received his awakened license, no company wanted to hire him because of his low rank. So he had to work part-time in many different places to make ends meet. But one day a real miracle happened. His younger sister gave him a letter that came to him from an influential company. The guy was very surprised. As it turned out, one of the largest dungeon clearing companies, Clearwater, began an active search for new staff. And Okita was one of those lucky enough to receive a job offer. He was very excited, because he hadn't even hoped for such an offer, and with such a low rank as his. Okita immediately set himself up for serious and hard work, because he wanted to provide a happy future for his sister and mother. Okita could not even imagine that in his new job, he would face severe rank oppression and inequality in the team. The dream job turned into a living hell. The A-ranked awakened, the so-called elite of the company, looked down on people like Okita, and used them in monster fights as their shields, which almost always ended in the death of the lower-ranked awakened. Clearwater didn't want to lose higher-ranked awakened in battles, so they deliberately recruited weak, low-ranked employees to protect the elite. In essence, they were just cannon fodder that could be easily replaced after death with exactly the same weaklings without special skills, and minimize losses among the A-rank awakened. Okita flew down with terror on his face, straight into the dungeon to the powerful monster. The elite had not only betrayed him and the other awakened ones, they had left him for dead. He was severely wounded and bled to death alone. Gathering his last strength, he opened his eyes. The only thought that ran through his mind was that he did not want to die here. The monster, determined to finish the job, crept closer and closer to its victim. It opened its toothy mouth with the intention of finishing the guy off. Okita looked the monster straight in the eye, waiting for the fatal blow. But another miracle happened. He managed to survive. Okita found himself in an unusual place, wounded and bloody, standing in front of a mysterious object that resembled an altar. Above the altar, in midair, hung a large crystal that radiated a mesmerizing glow. Okita touched the crystal and gained an amazing ability to create an unlimited number of rare cards. Many cards began to appear out of nowhere, flying out of the deck and surrounding the boy. Rare cards with unique abilities that could defeat monsters flew into the air in front of Okita and lined up in a row. If anyone could get hold of such a large deck, they would become invincible. Okita immediately decided to try one of the cards. He chose the dark two-headed serpent card. When he picked up the card, a wave of incredible energy and power swept through his body, even his eyes changed color and turned purple. The image of a serpent began to appear from the card. At first it was just a shadow. It twisted and turned as if in a tornado whirlwind and then fully manifested and appeared before Okita in all its power. Both heads of the creature were turning in different directions, and flames were coming out of its mouth. With both heads up, the serpent made terrifying sounds accompanied by jets of fire. Everything around was shaking and burning. In addition to the deck of cards, Okita's eyesight improved. He could now determine the enemy's abilities and strength at a glance. Okita sent the two-headed snake into attack, feeling omnipotent. His level of power was much higher than that of the highest-ranked awakened, and those who had humiliated and endangered him before did not even realize it. But soon they would find out. He would show them. Okita began to test new cards in battles, building up his strength and confidence. The other awakened ones were wary of his newfound power, afraid that he might accidentally destroy them along with the monsters. With the help of the gate cards, he defeated the powerful monsters one by one. The plan of revenge gradually matured in his mind. Only he has an endless deck of cards, and he will definitely use it to take revenge on his offenders, all those who tried to take advantage of his weakness and left him for dead. An eerie smile appeared on Okita's face. Clearwater employs a large number of elite awakened ones of high rank. Okita Hikaru was incredibly happy to get his dream job in such a prestigious place. However, the reality was not as rosy as he first thought. In a former pharmaceutical company building in Tokyo, a dungeon of rank C, level 9, was formed. Wind and dust rushed through the narrow passage of the dungeon. The two awakened ones moved with fear and caution through its tangled corridors in search of monsters. They arrived at the place that the radar showed, but it was a dead end. The signal was very weak, so it was decided to turn back to the rest of the team. They did not even suspect that monsters were already waiting behind them. The men were trapped. They were 3 F-rank goblins, and they immediately attacked the awakened. Their terrifying faces, like the skulls of the dead, were coming closer and closer. The awakened ones had nowhere to run. The sharp claws of the monsters dealt deadly blows, and blood splashed in all directions. When there was almost no hope left, and the goblin grabbed the awakened with one hand with the intention of devouring him, the sound of a gunshot rang out. The bullet passed through the monster's body with brilliant speed, and blood poured out. Finally, help came. The goblin let go of its victim, roared in pain, and began to fall to the ground. The other 2 goblins were also neutralized. The tortured faces of the injured awakened ones looked gratefully at their rescuers. They, in turn, instead of rushing to help the wounded, began to accuse them of weakness and pitifulness. They began to say that it was a great shame not to be able to defeat such a weak monster as the goblin. Okita Hikaru was the only one who at least simply approached the wounded and asked how they were feeling. He was sincerely worried about his colleagues. The rest of the team arrived at the battlefield, and the leader of the group ordered one of the awakened named Noguchi to report on the situation. Noguchi reported that the 4 goblins had been eliminated, and no traces of the magic stone were found after their deaths. The battlefield was covered with monster bloodstains, and strange colored steam rose from the ground, but there were no stones. Noguchi also summarized that 2 low-ranking members were attacked, wounded, and therefore unable to help in the further clearing of the dungeon. The awakened, who had barely survived the attack, were still lying on the ground. Okita was next to them and suggested that the group go back to a safe place where they could help the wounded. But no one wanted to listen to him. In their opinion, he was dead weight that would only get in the way. The team turned in the opposite direction and moved on, leaving the wounded behind. The weak and awakened could not believe that they were being left to fend for themselves. They begged not to leave them. Okita tried to persuade the team to at least give them first aid, to heal their wounds with the help of a card, but was harshly refused. The leader forbade him to waste magic and reminded him that he would be punished if he used the card without his direct order. Okita was incredibly sorry to leave his comrades in trouble, but he had received a direct order from the leader and could not disobey. Sad and guilty, he followed the others, and the awakened ones left behind could do nothing but watch in horror. To clear this dungeon, a team of elite awakened, most of whom were of the highest rank, A, and low-ranked awakened, one of whom was Okita, was assembled. When clearing the dungeons, weaklings like Okita are just pawns for the elite awakened. If something happens to the weaklings, they can be easily replaced by others. Okita was walking behind the group, and he summoned up the courage to address Noguchi, who asked him with considerable irritation what he wanted. In a voice full of fear, Okita dared to ask for weapons for his group members. Noguchi grabbed Okita by the collar of his shirt, shook him with all his might, and shouted that they already had weapons, so stop saying stupid things. In the arsenal of the elite awakened, there are not only gate cards, but also the latest weapons designed to fight the monsters of the dungeons. The bullets for this weapon use magical stones that can appear after the monster dies. Since the stones are incredibly valuable, the lowest ranks of the awakened are not given the best equipment. It is only suitable for self-defense, and is not suitable for battle. Okita clutched his hands to his throat. As expected, he was denied, but he at least tried to ask for better weapons, especially after what happened to his colleagues today. Another advantage of the higher-ranking awakened is their suits, which are custom-made from special fibers that partially protect them from possible injuries during combat. The suits of low-ranking awakened are the most ordinary ones. They do not have special fibers, so they can only rely on their own strength during the battle. Okita Hikaru's rank is F-. It can't be lower. He considers himself the worst awakened in existence. He is even forbidden to take part in battles, and for the elite awakened, he is only a heavy equipment carrier and servant. From the expression on Okita's face, one could guess that he considered himself even lower than the low-ranking pawns of the elite. The guy felt like a complete failure. From the outside, the building hadn't undergone any major changes and looked like an ordinary office building, but appearances can be deceiving. Inside the building was the dungeon, where one wrong step could cost you your life. With a heavy backpack on his shoulders, Okita climbed up the steps of the dungeon. Out of breath and sweating, he finally found himself in front of the terrifying entrance to the level 10 dungeon. It was incredibly hard to get here with so many things behind him. But there was no time to rest, because the monsters could attack at any moment. Okita was on the alert, constantly checking for enemy presence on the radar. Looking at the device once again, he noticed monsters moving near them. Okita immediately shouted loudly and warned the entire group that a large group of goblins, more than 10 individuals, had been spotted ahead. All members of the group, including the elite, looked warily in the direction from which the deadly danger was approaching them. In the darkness of the cave, the monsters' terrifying eyes shone, and they huddled in a group and waited. The roars of the goblins echoed through the cave, and they prepared to attack. With incredible speed, the monsters rushed toward the people. The leader of the awakened group gave the command to prepare for battle. It was ordered to destroy the first rows of monsters without using cards, only with weapons. The elite of the group prepared and tested their weapons in the few seconds left before the clash with the goblins. The leader also strictly ordered not to waste ammunition, to shoot accurately and precisely. Noguchi aimed his rifle at the monster, which was running toward him at high speed, its eyes glowing with bloodlust, but Noguchi did not give it a chance to get closer. The sound of a gunshot rang through the cave. The stout goblin was thrown back, roared, but did not die instantly. As Noguchi expected, he was only wounded. Shots were fired everywhere, but it was impossible to stop the flow of goblins. They were coming from all sides. Eventually, one managed to break through. The awakened, who was holding the defense in the first line, turned to Okita and ordered him to get ready for battle. The boy confidently picked up the only weapon he had, an electric stick that emitted light and was charged with electricity. He realized that this stick would not do much harm to the monster, but there was no other option, so Okita prepared to meet the monster. The goblin jumped at him instantly. A terrible face with long fangs emerged from the darkness, and he miraculously managed to dodge it, but did not let the goblin's jaws close around his neck. Okita managed to jump back a few meters and give himself some room to maneuver. As the monster circled around him, looking for a convenient position to attack, the boy gathered his courage and tried to strike first with the electric stick, but as expected, it did not work. The monster barely swayed. Okita froze in place, as if even the goblin was looking at him with contempt and surprise. The monster received only a light electric shock, which did not cause any damage, but only made it more angry. Its red eyes flashed with a thirst for murder, and it stood up to its full height and struck Okita hard, throwing him aside. The boy went tumbling like a broken doll. With horror in his eyes, he looked down at the goblin hovering over him, and Okita mentally said goodbye to his life. A shot rang out, and the goblin fell to the ground dead. The fatal shot was made by the awakened, who warned him about the goblin. The girl began to scream at Okita. She did not understand why he was paid money if he could not defeat even the lowest-ranked goblin. Okita sat on the ground behind the girl, who continued to shoot the monsters, and thought about what she had just said. He couldn't understand her irritation. The odds were clearly unequal. If he had a magic pistol like hers, he would have definitely defeated the monster. But unfortunately, the only weapon he had available to him was a ridiculous rod that shocked him with electricity. Okita's irritation turned to anger. If only he had a gun and the gate cards were a little better, he would have definitely defeated the goblin. But the elite awakened didn't give him a chance. It wasn't fair. The cleanup was complete, and the corpses of the goblins were lying everywhere. The leader of the group ordered to collect the magic stones that might have remained after the monsters' deaths. Indeed, there were several stones on the ground that shone brightly in blue. The awakened people were surprised by the small number of stones, because based on the number of corpses, there should have been many more. But in fact, it was not surprising, because these are F-ranked goblins, and low-ranked monsters rarely leave many stones behind. When you defeat a monster, there may be particles of magical power left at the place of its death. Magic stones. Rare stones can be obtained from particularly powerful monsters. They are used for gate cards and unlock new unique abilities. From low-ranked monsters, such as goblins, you can get fragments of magic stone. They are used in ammunition for weapons, but they can also be useful for gate cards. The thing is that a powerful skill requires a huge amount of magic to activate. That's why magic stone fragments can be useful even for high-ranked awakened. The girl offered several magic stones to her leader. The magic stone is given to the awakened one who defeats the monster. In other words, those who are not able to defeat the monster will never be able to get the stone. The leader asked Okita to see where the stairs to the next level were. Okita looked closely at the radar and determined that the stairs were 40 meters ahead of them. But in addition, the radar showed 3 enemy targets that were rapidly approaching. Before he could warn everyone, 3 new monsters appeared in front of them. They resembled lions, one sturdy with a terrifying fang, the other 2 smaller but also formidable. The largest of them roared, showing a powerful jaw full of sharp teeth. Okita and the others were on the alert, expecting another battle. This one was a shape-shifting lion of the demonic beast class, rank C. It had a gigantic mane, and was holding an impressive-sized axe. Next to the lion were 2 smaller monsters, D-rank guardian lions. The team immediately realized that these monsters would be much harder to deal with than the goblins. The leader ordered Okita to check the data on the lion werewolf just in case. Okita once again checked the data on the device, threat level C. This magical beast had no special skills, but it was not affected by firearms. The leader ordered to prepare for battle. The guard lions will protect the werewolf lion, they act as one. First, you need to break through the defense, and only then get to the lion shifter. The leader of the group began shouting orders, and the shield squad was tasked with creating protective barriers, preventing the lion guards from attacking the A-rank awakened squad, and it was strictly forbidden to leave their positions. The low-ranked shield squad clutched the gate cards tightly in their hands and prepared to follow the order. Meanwhile, the elite ones were throwing caustic comments. They humiliated them and threatened to kill them if they failed to hold the barrier. They did not care whether the shield unit would survive. With an axe slung over his shoulder, the lion shifter and his guards were approaching a human shield of people who would actually have to sacrifice themselves for the survival of the elite A-rank awakened. This is the fate of the lower-ranked awakened ones, and at the moment, they cannot change it. Okita was incredibly worried about his colleagues, shouting words of support and wishing them luck. With hope in his eyes, he wanted only one thing: for them to survive the monsters and come back alive. Reference to the arsenal of weapons of the awakened. This is an awakened firearm. It looks like a regular pistol and is approved for use by the Awakened Research Department. It is loaded with 9 bullets with a magic stone inside. Helps in the fight against small monsters. This weapon is similar to a 12-gauge shotgun. It was approved in the same year as the previous model. The bullets inside can be replaced with regular ones and the weapon can be used to destroy obstacles. This is a stun stick. A stick that Okita and other team members from the low-ranking awakened squad have. It strikes with electricity. The voltage is about 300,000 volts. The maximum that can be done with such a weapon is to temporarily scare away a monster. Frightened, Okita looked at the monsters, which roared and roared with furious rage. The werewolf lion's head was even more distorted in a furious snarl, saliva dripping from its sharp teeth. The werewolf lion raised his hand and roared with his mouth open. This was the battle signal for the lion guards to attack, and they rushed to the attack. The leader of the group ordered the awakened ones to immediately prepare cards for defense, and not to retreat. The guardian lions had already approached the first line of defense, which consisted of low-ranking awakened ones. The leader firmly ordered them not to move and to let them get as close as possible. The awakened had no choice but to obey the order, trembling with fear and clutching the cards that created a protective barrier. The first lion guard rushed to attack. The awakened simultaneously raised their cards up and shouted, "Gate! Protective barrier!" The protective barrier card creates a magical field in front of the owner that protects against physical attacks. The card's rarity is D, and it has no elemental properties. Magical shining circles formed around the awakened ones who used the card. And then a kind of large transparent shield appeared in front of the face of each card holder. These shields joined in a single row, which created a protective barrier. The guardian lion crashed into the newly created shield at full speed. The force of the impact threw the awakened one back, but the shield held. The monster could not break through it. Now both lion guards were lined up in front of the shield, and the awakened ones realized that it would not withstand such attacks for long, so they asked the elite awakened ones to start attacking the monsters as soon as possible. Noguchi confidently pulled out a red card, told the low-ranking ones not to whine, and prepared to attack. As soon as he shouted the word, "Gate!" a red circle glowed around him and pillars of fire erupted. At the same time, Noguchi never tired of showing off and showing what the A-rank awakened were capable of. When the card was activated, the fire warrior appeared in all its glory. His hair also resembled the mane of a monster lion, but it was made of real fire. The fire warrior can attack the enemy with a special sword or inflict damage with fire. The rarity of the card is A level. The elemental property is fire. The battle began, and Noguchi directed his warrior directly to the guard lions. The fire warrior drew his sword and charged. One of the lions was engulfed in flames, growling and writhing in pain. Meanwhile, another lion guard attacked the shield squad, which was trying to hold the barrier. Each subsequent attack was stronger than the last. The barrier could not withstand such tension, and the low-ranking ones began to beg for help. The elite awakened ordered them to shut up and moved into battle. An awakened of rank A has received the green card, Wind Warrior. This warrior is a master of the element of wind and uses his sword to create powerful attacks from air currents that can tear the enemy apart. The rarity of the card is A. The elemental property is wind. The wind warrior was ordered to destroy the lion guard, who continued to fight against the barrier. The warrior's attack was instantaneous and ruthless. The powerful wind currents created by the sword threw the monster away from the barrier. It was dead. The A-ranked awakened ones congratulated each other on their victory. Their superiority in strength over the low-ranked ones was obvious. They knew it well and bragged about it. But it was too early to rejoice, as Okita reminded them that there was still a dragon lion left, and they must not be distracted. Just as Okita was saying these words, the dragon lion brought his axe overhead to strike the barrier and the people behind it. They tried to hold on to the barrier with their last strength, but the monster's axe was coming in relentlessly. There was a tremendous crack, like the sound of breaking glass, and the barrier could not withstand the impact and shattered into small pieces. In addition to the barrier, the people were also injured and could not believe that such damage had been caused by just one blow. The werewolf lion stood with a bloody axe over the group of defenseless awakened ones. They heard loud footsteps and loud shouts, and Okita was running toward them at full speed, holding a stun stick. He ran ahead of his wounded comrades, shielding them with his body, intending to distract the terrifying monster, and thus allow the wounded to move away and hide. It was his chance to prove that he could fight too. Noguchi saw what Okita was about to do, shouted his name loudly and kicked him in the face. Surprised and bloody, Okita stood in front of an equally surprised monster, and could not understand why he had just been beaten. He just wanted to help and prove his ability to fight. Noguchi continued to kick him and call him derogatory names. He believed that Okita had no right to get in front of them and try to do their work. In his opinion, the only task in his insignificant life is to treat others. Okita's rank is even lower than F, so in Noguchi's opinion, he has no right to fight. There are a rank awakened for that. The furious Noguchi used the red card, Fire Warrior, and he instantly appeared in front of him, surrounded by uncontrollable flames on all sides. Without delay, the warrior rushed into battle with the lion werewolf and began to deliver powerful blows. The leader ordered the people from the shield squad, who were less affected, to immediately create new barriers, and Okita to treat the wounded as soon as possible. He took out his map and prepared to follow the order. An elixir card that helps you quickly regain strength, heals minor injuries, and stops bleeding. The card's rarity is F. It has no elemental properties. Okita held the Caruthas up to the wounded man. It shone with a light blue light, and the treatment began. In a couple of minutes, the wounded man recovered. He thanked Okita, picked up the card, and rushed back to help restore the barrier. The shield team tried their best to hold the newly created barrier, but the werewolf lion broke it with his axe every time and injured more and more people. The A-ranked awakened, in turn, also tried to hold back the monster using their gate cards. The leader of the group ordered us not to relax and to try to create as many barriers as possible. So it turns out that the lowest ranks continue to sacrifice themselves endlessly. With their cards, they can only take the hit, thus helping the elite. Low-ranking ones can only defend, and the main work is done by high-ranking awakened ones. They destroy monsters. The battle with the lion werewolf continued, with the wind warrior and the fire warrior taking turns striking. Okita tried to quickly heal the wounded with an elixir card, but unfortunately, his rank was so low that he was not even allowed to use his shield. He wondered how this would end up for him. The werewolf lion was writhing in pain. A little more effort and the monster would be defeated. The awakened asked their leader to help them finish the lion. He agreed, took out his gate card, and began to say the command. Gradually, a hand appeared from the card, and splashes of water began to fly everywhere. Then the warrior materialized completely. Like all the previous warriors, he was gigantic in size and very formidable in appearance, and there was no doubt about his power. It was the Sea Warrior, a creature shrouded in fog and water. With the help of a spear, it can control the flow of water and stick it into the bodies of its enemies. The card's rarity is level A. The elemental property is water. The Sea Warrior held the spear with both hands and attacked instantly. The attack was so powerful and fast that the werewolf lion could not fight back in time. Finally, the lion was killed. After the lion's death, a rare magic stone appeared. It was different from the stones left behind by the goblins. It was bigger and brighter. According to the rules, the magic stone is given to the awakened one who killed the monster. This stone went to the leader of the group. The low-ranking awakened ones were again left with nothing. They had no chance. It is because of such unequal conditions, when your efforts are not noticed or appreciated, that many awakened ones quit. We are stuck in a swamp of inequality and injustice, and it doesn't matter if it was a regular office job or clearing a dungeon. The leader of the group called Okita over and praised him for trying to protect the others from the lion shifter's attack. This was a very brave act, and so the leader decided to give him a rare A-rank card. He was saving it for the boss of this dungeon, so he asked if Okita was ready to use it during the battle. Of course, Okita was ready to use it. He was very surprised by such a generous gift, but Noguchi was even more surprised than he was. He couldn't understand why a valuable card would be given to such a weakling. The leader explained that few people would have done what Okita did. Knowing how strong the enemy was, he still rushed to the defense of his comrades. Noguchi clearly did not like the leader's praise for Okita. The leader told Okita to listen carefully and explained that this was an incredibly powerful card, used to capture the strongest monsters. It can only be used when the leader gives the signal. When the leader gives the signal, Okita must say, "Release." Each awakened person can only have one gate card. Therefore, Okita had to give his elixir card. He could not use it anymore. They had only one attempt to defeat the dungeon boss, so the leader was counting on Okita. Finally, he was noticed. Perhaps Okita would be able to raise his status, a chance he couldn't miss, and he clutched the card in his hands hopefully. But Noguchi clearly didn't like the idea, and looked warily at the leader. The group of awakened people carefully climbed the stairs to the entrance of the level 10 dungeon. Once inside, they moved forward, listening to Okida's instructions, who held a navigator and determined the way. Judging by the layout of the building, they were headed for the boss's room. One of the awakened ones was really surprised that he was so good at blueprints. Okita replied that this was not surprising because he had studied this topic a little when he was a student. Suddenly, the radar gave an alarm signal, and the tracks of a large monster were detected. Apparently, this is the boss of the dungeon. The monster was really impressive in size and probably had equally impressive powers. Looking at it, one could definitely tell that the battles with the previous monsters were just a warm-up, and now they were really going to face a real test. Okita, for the umpteenth time that day, looked at another monster in horror. These are level gate cards. For cards such as Fire Warrior or Wind Warrior, for example, the power of the level depends on the rarity of the card. The higher the rarity, the more powerful the level. Studies have shown that there are even cards of the S rarity level that are more powerful than the A level gate cards. These are low-level gate cards. Cards issued by Clearwater to low-ranked awakened, including Okita. Among these cards, it is impossible to find any with a level higher than C. The dungeon boss turned his fearsome gaze on the people who were numb with terror and let out a frightening roar. The monster's class and rank were unknown, unlike the previous ones. The awakened ones were overwhelmed by its size, and they began to doubt whether it could be defeated at all. The leader of the group heard the conversations of frightened people and ordered them to immediately stop panicking and pull themselves together. Everyone needs to take positions and get ready for battle. Under no circumstances should anyone get within the radius of his attacks. Okita was ordered to collect at least some information about the monster. The guy looked at the monitor carefully, checked all the sources available to him, but did not find any clear information. But most of all, this monster looked like a basilisk. The leader of the group assumed that if this monster looked like a basilisk, it must use venom in its attacks. So the information he had was confirmed. The leader has warned everyone that the boss of this dungeon is most likely the same class of monster as the basilisk. The A-ranked awakened were ordered to prepare their cards and test how the attacks would affect the monster. Noguchi and the other elite awakened took out their cards and prepared to attack. The others were ordered to create 3 rows of protective barriers. The shield squad was weakened after the previous battle but confidently agreed to follow the order. Okita, on the other hand, was ordered to stay away for now, as he was their secret weapon. He had a rare card. The final outcome of the battle depended on him. The leader decisively ordered to take out the cards and start the attack, while the monster roared and howled, probably trying to intimidate the people who were running and fussing under its feet. It was also ready to attack. The monster went on the offensive, its huge body approaching the first line of defense at full speed. The awakened instantly activated the protective barrier cards, and shields began to form in front of each of them, forming a single line. The dungeon boss stretched out a paw with long claws and smashed the shields into small pieces with a single blow. He destroyed the defense on the first try, and the awakened flew in different directions. This was an incredible power, so without delay, the awakened activated their level A cards. The Fire Warrior, Wind Warrior, and Sea Warrior prepared for battle. Combining their weapons, they launched a triple attack. The power concentrated into one continuous stream of deadly energy hit the monster. It was unbelievable, but the dungeon boss remained almost unharmed. The combined attack had no effect. The awakened were shocked and furious, and while they were contemplating their next move, the monster attacked back. The powerful blow landed right in the group of people, scattering the awakened ones in different directions, many of whom lost their cards and could not defend themselves. Noguchi was lying on the ground, but he tried to use the Fire Warrior card again and repelled the monster's next attack. The line was broken, the battle was not going according to plan, and the leader realized that he had to do something immediately. He gave the order to retreat, for everyone to return to the entrance. They couldn't even imagine such a power. The A-rank awakened were powerless against the dungeon boss. Okita felt angry and determined. The group leader realized that it was time to use the rare card he had entrusted to Okita. The boy was ready to finally use it. The leader warned him that this card had a very long range, so it would affect everyone except the user. Due to the peculiarities of the map, Okita would have to fight the monster alone, and the leader asked him again if he was ready for this, and he nodded in the affirmative. He would not change his mind. Suddenly, a strange expression appeared on the leader's face, and he said a very interesting thing. It turned out that he had recommended Okita for this position in the company. The guy was extremely surprised. According to the leader, people who are capable of protecting their comrades at the cost of their own lives are very rare. Clearwater appreciates this, and the leader was right to send Okita a job offer. After his words, the leader patted him on the shoulder encouragingly, asking him not to let the team down. They were all counting on him. The leader gathered the awakened together and told them that Okita would now use the card against the dungeon boss. They should expect a powerful attack. They were also instructed to protect Okita while he was sneaking up on the monster. With blatant insincerity on their faces, the elite awakened wished the boy good luck. Okita thought that they had finally noticed him, and he had to live up to their expectations. This is his chance to get promoted. He won't get another chance like this. At the leader's command, the entire group of awakened people rushed to attack the monster. They had to distract the monster's attention to themselves so that Okita could get closer and use the card. The Wind Warrior and the Fire Warrior were among the first to attack, and the awakened ones also used firearms, so all means were employed. Amidst the sounds of battle, Okita ran as fast as he could toward his target. The boy managed to get almost close to the boss. The monster was furious because he was attacked from all sides. The sounds of gunfire did not stop, but this did not prevent him from pawing at Okita. But the boy was nimble and managed to jump away in time. He threw away all doubts and fear and continued to run. Another punch, and this time Okita was knocked down and ended up on the ground. The group leader shouted that it was time to use the map. With a confident movement, the boy took out the gate map entrusted to him. It was now that the course of the entire battle was to be decided. The monster watched Okita's every move carefully. Taking the map in his hands, he shouted the command, "Gate! Release!" loud and clear. The card flew up above the boy's hand and shone with red light. It grew in size and hovered just above the monster's head. Rays of red light surrounded the monster. Okita was looking at the map in anticipation, wondering if he had succeeded and made it. And as soon as this thought flashed through his mind, he felt a loud crack. The ground shook under his feet, and huge cracks began to spread across the floor. A chasm formed where Okita was standing, and he began to fall down. Terror and despair instantly took over all his senses, and he could not believe that this was happening to him. Okita continued to fall rapidly into the arms of the seemingly endless abyss. After flying for an unknown number of meters, Okita fell to the ground with a thud. The impact was so strong that all the air was knocked out of his lungs. His whole body hurt terribly, but he forced himself to get up. Okita found himself trapped at the bottom of the abyss that had formed after he used the map. The good news was that the dungeon boss was blocked by huge blocks of stone. Dust was flying everywhere, and Okita was completely disoriented and had no idea where he was or what had happened. When the dust settled and it started to get light, he looked up and saw that the entire team was standing on top of the rockfall unharmed. He could not understand why he was the only one who fell. Okita shouted from the bottom of the pit to the leader, asking what had just happened. But instead of an answer, he heard sinister smiles that turned into outright mockery. Even the leader was laughing. The elite awakened were laughing at him, at the fact that he had really fallen. To say that the guy was surprised by this behavior of the team would be an understatement. He was incredibly puzzled. And then the leader said the words that seemed to knock the ground out from under the guy's feet again. It turns out that this card has no attacking capabilities. In fact, it is a gate card, a trap. This card destroys the entire area around it. In other words, not only the monster but also the card holder is trapped. The boss of this dungeon has surprisingly strong armor, so the only way to kill him is to attack him directly in the mouth. The leader had read somewhere that it opens wide when the monster is ready to swallow the victim. Okita continued to listen in shock. The leader reminded him that Okita couldn't find the data on the monster in his tablet. It turns out that it was the leader who corrected some information about the monster so that no one would know about its weakness before it was needed. The team needed someone like Okita to win this battle, because you always need someone to act as bait. The boy listened with horror to the leader's confession. The mockery was heard again, and Noguchi started laughing again and calling Okita a gullible fool. Suddenly, the ground shook again, and the monster covered with stones was released and screamed. It immediately attacked Okita and injured him. But the awakened ones were in no hurry to save the boy. They waited for the monster to finish him off as soon as possible. Okita was severely traumatized, and in despair, he began to think about why he was in such a simultaneously senseless and cruel situation. How do these scoundrels have the guts to leave people to their fate, to die? The monster continued to try to attack Okita, and the elite awakened ones watched with interest from above as if it were a performance. Noguchi decided to have some fun, and to make the spectacle more interesting, he took out a fire warrior card. The warrior materialized and attacked, burning everything in his path. The monster screamed in pain, struck by fire and sword at the same time. But not only the monster was affected by the fire, but also Okita, who screamed and begged the awakened one to stop. Okita tried to run away and hide away from the fire. He realized that if the monster didn't kill him, the fire would, and he would be burned alive. While Okita was trying his best to survive, the awakened ones were calmly watching the battle, not interested in the boy's fate. Suddenly, the leader noticed something strange in the monster's behavior and asked Noguchi to temporarily stop attacking the fire warrior. The monster opened its mouth menacingly, and a suspicious green steam began to come out of it. It seemed that the monster was preparing a new attack. Okita also noticed this and prudently covered his head with his jacket, because it looked like the monster was preparing to spew poison. And indeed, a layer of acidic substance formed in the monster's throat, which it aimed to release in Okita's direction. As soon as he laid down on the ground, the formed poisonous mass flew over his head, miraculously not hitting the boy. Lying on the ground under his jacket, Okita screamed, preparing to die, but to his surprise nothing happened. It was too early to die. When he got up and looked out of the shelter, it turned out that it was not a liquid, but a poisonous gas, and he rose up. Because of the fire and heat, all the poisonous fumes flew upward, directly toward the group of awakened people. Okita was much lower than them, so the gas did not reach him. This was his chance to escape. He had to find a way out and get out. The group of awakened people upstairs began to cough and choke on the gas, so it was decided to immediately retreat to the exit. While the monster was distracted by them, Okita hid behind a piece of rock and thought about how to get out of this trap. If he had destroyed an entire floor with his card, then they had most likely fallen down to the 9th floor. Okita hoped that he could find some kind of passage that would lead to the corridors, and if he found a corridor, he could escape from here. After walking a bit, he saw a gorge in the distance, and decided to try to get out through it. The guy was seriously wounded and doubted that he would make it there, but it was worth a try. Okita ran to the gorge with all his courage. He knew he had to hurry, because the monster could turn its attention to him again at any moment. As soon as this thought crossed his mind, the monster turned its head in his direction, but he had already run into the gorge. The guy was exhausted and wounded, his despair was overwhelming. He could not believe that he had been treated like this, that the elite awakened ones had left him to die. He came to a terrible realization that they were doing to other weak awakened ones exactly as they had done to him. While these terrible thoughts were spinning in his head, he continued to wander through the tunnels, looking for a way out. The boy kept hitting dead ends, but he kept looking, and according to his calculations, he should have reached one of the corridors by now. His strength was failing him, he could barely stand on his feet, and suddenly Okita saw a bright glow in one of the crevices. This was his way to salvation, and he approached the gorge with hope and looked inside. A bright light shone from there, so there must be some room. Okita finally found hope for salvation, but how to get into the room? The gorge was very narrow. He pressed his bloody hands against the wall and begged it to open in desperation. Unfortunately, the monster found him before he could get into the room. A huge shadow fell on Okita. There was a thunderous impact, and stones fell to the ground, further injuring the boy. The monster punched a hole in the wall with its head to get to him. Okita was knocked to the side, his mutilated body fell to the ground face down, and it seemed that he was dead. But he managed to lift his head slightly and look straight at the monster that was preparing to finish him off. Was it all over and he was going to die right there? No, he couldn't die here. He had to try to get out with his last bit of strength. He stretched out his hand to the crevice with light and begged it to open, pushing with all his might, and meanwhile the monster prepared to release poisonous gas in Okita's direction. The monster's mouth was opening wider and wider, and the poisonous mass was ready to hit the boy. Suddenly, Okita fell into some unknown dark space. He was falling fast. The fall ended with a strong impact on a hard surface. His weakened and mutilated body could no longer fight and endure the pain. Lying in the dark, Okita began to lose consciousness. An unknown source of light began to penetrate Okita's closed eyes, and the incredibly bright rays made him wake up. The boy barely managed to stand up. His hands and whole body began to emit a light, strange glow. Okita began to come to. He realized that he was still alive and somehow found himself in a very strange place. The giant-sized room seemed to have no end in sight and was well lit. But the strangest thing was that the dungeon boss had disappeared somewhere, and Okita was completely alone. The guy started to panic when he realized that there was no way out of this room. He couldn't find any doors. Yes, he had somehow managed to escape, but how could he get out of here now? It was another trap. Okita noticed an interesting detail. The floor of the room had the same drawings on it as on the gate maps. The room had a strange feeling, as if it was filled with magic, very similar to the one that radiates from the stones that appear after a monster dies. Then a light suddenly appeared in the distance, and Okita remembered that it was thanks to it that he had been saved, so he decided to find out what it was. When he got closer to the light source, he saw something that looked like an altar with a large crystal hanging in the air above it. He also heard voices, the source of which he could not determine, but which seemed to be coming from the crystal. When he tried to touch the crystal, the voices became louder and spoke in different languages unknown to Okita. He was frightened and pulled his hand back. The voices kept getting louder, each time adding a new voice and a new, unknown language. Okita still couldn't determine exactly where they were coming from or who was speaking to him. It seemed that the crystal was trying to find the right language, trying different variants. Finally, among the many voices, he heard something similar to his native language and recognized some words. Now the voice was in his native language, and it turned out that Okita was being asked a question, a strange question. The voice was asking him if he wanted to receive power. When he heard this, he immediately remembered all the mockery and suffering he had experienced today, how his team had set him up and left him for dead. So of course he wanted to get the power to take revenge. He didn't care that this power was offered by something unknown, he was eager to get it, so he said yes. The next thing the voice asked was whether Okita was willing to sign the contract, and the crystal began to scan him. When the scan was over, the voice confirmed the presence of the Awakened One's magical power, and said that he had a 95% chance of becoming the Chosen One. Okita was very surprised by the word, chosen, and was completely confused. Then a technical voice, like in a computer, seemed to turn on the setup mode. The phrase, damage repair, was uttered, and immediately the wounds on Okita's body began to heal, as if they were evaporating. The next step was the correction of his vision. The guy's eyes glowed purple. The feeling was very strange. Now Okita could see perfectly without his glasses. After that, the process of replacing the gate cards with high-ranked cards began. Finally, Okita would have strong cards, and he was incredibly happy. The phrase that the process of replacing cards was launched was heard again, and Okita remembered the leader's words that an awakened person can have only one card. He exchanged his elixir card for a trap card, which he then lost. Now he had no cards at all. The card pocket hanging on his side started to vibrate, and the voice said again that the card replacement process was running. It seems that the crystal was stuck, it changed color and began to spark. The voice repeated the same phrase over and over again with interruptions and stuttering. There was clearly something wrong. The crystal flew higher and began to rotate at an incredible speed. Lightning flashed everywhere. Okita screamed and started running away from the crystal as far as he could, and the room lit up with a bright flash, like an explosion. The boy managed to fall to the floor, and when he opened his eyes he saw that the crystal had stopped throwing lightning and changed color, as if it had switched off. It became quiet, the voices stopped. Okita curiously approached the crystal and began to shout at it, because the voice promised him cards of high rank. After he said that, something strange started happening to the card pocket, and Okita decided to check if there were cards in there, just in case, so he reached into the pocket. To his surprise, there was indeed a purple card in his pocket. He took it out and said the word gate, loudly. When Okita decided to examine the card more closely, he noticed that he was holding not one card, but two. He was surprised, because an awakened person can only hold one card. Okita opened his pocket, and a lot of cards started flying out at the same time. So many cards, it just couldn't be. They flew out and lined up in the air in front of Okita in several rows, and he still didn't understand how this was possible, because how could one person have such a huge deck of cards? The guy suggested that this could have happened because of a malfunction with the crystal. It was possible that the cards could be broken or incorrect because of this. Okita decided to check one card just in case. When he touched the card, all the information about it seemed to move into his head. It was as if the data on all the gate cards had been downloaded to him at the same time. Okita stood among the maps, confused and dizzy. Perhaps after this download, he could use all the cards at once. He decided to test his theory by using a card. He picked a card and said the words, Dark Two-Headed Serpent. The interesting thing was that he now knew the names of all the cards. A snake began to appear from the gate card. At first it was only a silhouette, but later it materialized into a full-fledged two-headed dragon of gigantic size. It must have been very rare, perhaps even stronger than rank A. The two-headed snake decided to demonstrate to Okita its level of strength and additional capabilities. It turned out that he could throw fire, and a burning mixture began to form in his mouth, which was becoming more intense with each passing second. Having accumulated a sufficient discharge, the snake sent a jet of fire into the ground, stones, dust, and heat flew to the sides, and a giant hole was formed at the place of impact. Okita was shocked. How could a card have such incredible power? Could the other cards be just as powerful? He began to take out the cards one by one, saying their names: Magic Volley, Silver Arrow, Flame Swirl, Surface Transformation. He had to test them. The cards he used flew in different directions, they circled around him, demonstrating their capabilities. Lightning sparked everywhere, fire burned, it was a fantastic power, energy was raging around, it surrounded Okita, it permeated the air. A sinister smile appeared on the boy's lips, with such power he was invincible. He was surrounded by an evil aura, now he was not afraid of anything, either the dungeon boss nor the elite awakened ones who had left him to die like garbage. He dreamed of looking each of them in the face when they realized the level of power he had just gained. Okita stood in front of the shattered room and thought. He had tried almost all of the cards, and each of them was stronger than the rare level A gate cards. If he continued now, there would be nothing left of the room at all, with many cracks and holes on the ground. Apparently, he had enough practice for today. This whole situation was amazing, but still, what exactly happened to Okita? Earlier, they had been told that an awakened person can have only one gate card, but they can use it as many times as they want. The card allows you to use amazing abilities and skills. The awakened ones gain power they never dreamed of. As mentioned earlier, there is a strict but fair rank system among the awakened. Rank A awakened are the face of the company. They use rare cards with strong abilities. Next are the B and C ranked awakened, who use their cards to support and assist the A ranked awakened. The D and E ranked awakened are supposed to protect the above-mentioned colleagues, and the lowest ranked awakened, F, are actually expendable during the battle. Rumor has it that there are even S-rank awakened working somewhere, far superior in power to even A-rank awakened, but little is known about them. It's amazing that Okita could now control such strong and rare cards, and he has a lot of them. Normally, awakened of his level simply cannot handle such power. And yet these cards are clearly not S-level, at least, they were described differently in various gossip. In addition, Okita now not only has a strong deck of cards, but he seems to be filled with some kind of power, and his eyesight has improved. It is unlikely that such significant changes in the body were caused by the cards. Okita decided that it was enough to think about it. He still has to defeat the basilisk, the boss of this dungeon. And with new strength, he would succeed. He raised his hand in the air, reached into his card pocket to prepare for battle, but his hand suddenly froze. Okita suddenly realized that he did not know how to get out of this room. There were no doors. He concentrated and began to remember how he had gotten into this room. Memories flashed through his mind. The guy stretched out his hand in front of him and said, "Open up." A bright line of light appeared in the middle of the pitch-black wasteland, gradually expanding into a passage to caves similar to the ones he had come from. Okita was shocked that he was able to open the passage with just one word. It was obvious that Okita had returned to the place he came from. The dungeon boss was no longer here, he had disappeared somewhere. He noticed traces of blood on the walls of the cave, traces of his bloody hands, which he had left when he was wounded and looking for some way out to escape the monster. But now there was no crevice through which he had passed. When Okita didn't find the gorge, he was terrified that he might have dreamed it. He decided to check it out, reached into his pocket, and quickly pulled out one of the cards, saying the words "gate," and activated the card. The map was real, the same one he tested in the mysterious room. It wasn't a dream, it was real. Walking confidently, Okita went in search of the basilisk. Now he could definitely destroy it. He was distracted from his search by strange sounds from a neighboring cave. It sounded like a battle. Okita peered into the cave to determine the exact source of the noise and saw a basilisk, the boss of the dungeon, in a pit howling loudly. Okita looked around and noticed who the monster was fighting. The leader was downstairs with the rest of the awakened. They had come back to destroy the monster, but they were arguing about something. The elite awakened ones were arguing over who should be the next bait for the monster. Noguchi suggested that the D-ranked awakened ones should be used as bait, because in his opinion, that's what they were for. Hearing this, the D-rank awakened ones became indignant and started arguing. Everyone kept shouting until the leader silenced them. He said that the bait was urgently needed and he didn't care who it was, it had to be decided quickly, because the basilisk was preparing for a new attack. Noguchi roughly grabbed one of the D-rank awakened and dragged him to the pit where the monster was. The guy struggled, but it was useless. Okita watched the situation from above in horror. He couldn't believe that he too had once dreamed of rising to the A rank. Would he end up like these elite awakened ones who were now mocking the low-ranking ones? No, he would never be like them. The elite believe that they have every right to muddy the waters of those below them. Let them now see what force I will use against them for their betrayal. It was time to start the show. Okita pulled a card from his pocket and raised it above his head and said the word "gate." The monster felt the power of the card and turned its attention to Okita. The leader of the awakened noticed this immediately, wondering what the basilisk could have been distracted by. When he saw what the monster was looking at, he couldn't believe his eyes at first. The leader couldn't imagine how Okita managed to survive. Looking directly at the monster, Okita resolutely took out and activated the card of the dark two-headed snake. Everything around him lit up, and his eyes began to shine brightly. The leader of the awakened watched in horror and surprise as the snake summoned by Okita immediately launched a lightning attack on the basilisk. The basilisk and the two-headed serpent, which looked more like a dragon, stood opposite each other and waited. Okita shouted the command to kill the basilisk, and the dragon did not hesitate for a moment, but bit the monster in the throat, and blood poured out. The group of awakened ones watched the battle. They were puzzled and terrified. The dragon and the basilisk intertwined their bodies in a deadly confrontation, roaring and snapping their jaws, trying to inflict a fatal bite on each other. Okita gave another order to the dragon to burn the basilisk. The dragon prepared to release a jet of hellish fire down its throat. Basilisk, in turn, prepared to shoot a stream of poisonous gas at the dragon. The confrontation was terrifying but spectacular, as they simultaneously used their deadly weapons. The poisonous gas and hellfire merged into one deadly mass. The poisonous substance scattered throughout the cave. There was so much of it that it hit a group of elite awakened ones, screaming in different directions. Okita was incredibly pleased with what he was seeing, and at last his plan of revenge was coming to fruition. The entire cave was covered in thick dust, and Okita was sure that the last attack had at least hit the dungeon boss. He did not know how long he would have to fight, but he would try to give it his best shot. Okita was preparing to calculate the monster's next move. He didn't know if it would try to attack him in the back or if it would use the poison attack again. While he was thinking about how to kill the dungeon boss, the dust settled and Okita saw the corpse of the monster in front of him. It was already dead. It turns out that he was killed by the first strong attack of the dragon. Even the presence of a hard shell did not help him survive. The dragon was even stronger than he had imagined. Suddenly, out of nowhere, electronic signs with inscriptions appeared in the air in front of Okita. They said that the dungeon data had been updated and that the victory over the dungeon boss had been confirmed. Additionally, the information was duplicated by a voice, the same as in the mysterious room. The voice continued, "The rarity level of the Dark Two-Headed Serpent card has been increased, and you have been granted the title of Dragon Master." Okita was surprised that the card's rarity had increased, which meant that he could now improve cards and increase their effect. Who would have thought that a rare, powerful card could be improved even further? Okita was confused by these signs with inscriptions. He had never seen anything like this before. Why did they start appearing in front of him, and in such large numbers? They were everywhere. He noticed a large stone on the ground, left over from the basilisk. Above the stone was a sign with precise information about its origin. Its name was the Magic Stone of the Basilisk, its status was a treasure from a monster, and its magical ability was unknown. It was noted that the stone could be picked up. Okita crouched down to pick it up, and the stone was indeed rare, just as the sign said. It was the first time the boy had ever held a magic stone in his hands, his eyes shining with delight. He still couldn't believe that he was able to defeat the monster and get a rare stone from it. Okita happily thanked the dragon who was standing next to him. He could not have done it without him. Okita called the dragon back to the card. He had done his job, he could rest. The boy again heard voices coming from the nearby caves, probably members of the group of awakened ones. The dragon's attack was so strong that they were thrown back by the blast wave. Okita ran to the sound of the voices, hoping that no one was seriously injured. He found them unconscious in the cave. No one seemed to be seriously injured. To Okita's surprise, it turned out that even an A-ranked fighter could not repel such a force. Above the unconscious awakened, signs with current information also glowed. The first was Kenji Noguchi, rank A, currently unable to fight, skill fire warrior, unconscious. Next was Ryoko Hirayama, rank A, currently unable to fight, wind warrior skill, unconscious. Next to her was Takuya Kikuchi, rank D, currently unable to fight, skill protective barrier, unconsciousness. Okita was surprised to find Mr. Taira, the leader of the awakened group, unconscious not far from the others. There were signs above him, too, Shigeru Taira, rank A, currently unable to fight, skill C warrior, unconsciousness. The leader began to regain consciousness, opened his eyes and was very surprised to see that Okita was completely unharmed. The leader was seriously frightened, asked the boy many questions about the dungeon boss and the unknown dragon, and then said in a frightened voice that he had to get out of here before it was too late. Okita looked the distraught leader in the eye and told him that he had destroyed the dungeon boss. The leader was amazed. He did not believe that the boy could defeat the monster alone. Standing at a distance, Okita asked the question that had been on his mind: why did the leader deceive him and give him a trap card, even though he had assured him that he was giving him a card with attacking abilities? Okita waited for an answer, his gaze confident and terrifying at the same time. The leader noticed this immediately, and for a second he even thought that this was a completely different person, such a powerful energy was coming from the guy. He began to assure Okita that no one was trying to deceive him, he had misunderstood everything. The leader continued to convince Okita that no one was fooling him. According to him, in order to reveal the monster's weaknesses, someone from the team has to do dangerous work, and if he had told him this right away, everything would have gone wrong. He allegedly chose Okita only because he wanted to give him the opportunity to show his strength and raise his rank. Of course, Okita did not buy this coward's explanation. He had never respected or appreciated him before, and now he was saying the exact opposite. Okita seemed to have made him nervous. The leader realized that he was caught, and when they got back, the company would find out how they wanted to deal with Okita. But it's not just about Okita. Now everyone can find out about the other low-ranking awakened ones they were sending to their deaths. Before the other members of the group woke up, the leader planned to distract Okita and get rid of him. The leader began to promise Okita that when they got out of here, he would tell everyone how the boy had defeated the dungeon boss on his own. By the way, he still had no idea how Okita managed to do it, because he was even below F rank. The leader made an assumption that Okita must have managed to get a rare map somewhere. He asked the boy to show him the map of the gate. The guy's expression instantly changed, and with a sinister smile, Okita kindly agreed to show the leader his card. He took it out and held it out to the man. With a quick movement, the leader snatched the card from Okita's hands. Before that, the leader's kind and unhappy face instantly became terrifyingly threatening. He pointed the stolen card at Okita and said that he would die now. But Okita was ready for such a turn. He grabbed another card and said the word gate. This simply couldn't be. Where did the guy get another card? He had taken it. The leader was shocked. Angry, he used his gate card and summoned a sea warrior to finally deal with the boy. Before the sea warrior could fully materialize from the map, Okita summoned a dark two-headed serpent. It immediately stood in front of the sea warrior and snarled at the leader, who was looking down at it in a daze. Okita gave the command to attack. The serpent sank its teeth into the sea warrior, and the battle began. The leader cowered in fear on a rock and watched as the snake tore into his sea warrior. How could Okita have prevented the attack? The leader panicked. Yes, it turns out that it was Okita who summoned the dragon that defeated the dungeon boss, and fear took over the leader. Okita approached him and asked him not to worry, because he was not interested in the leader at all. He had no intention of killing him. Okita said he was leaving the company. He reassured the leader and said that he had no intention of telling anyone about what had happened. Okita thanked him, said goodbye, and left. He didn't want to have anything to do with them anymore. The power he had gained would help him achieve great success. The leader couldn't stand the arrogance of a low-ranked one. How dare he talk to an elite A-ranked blowhard like that? He had to take the map away from Okita. This snake had to belong to him, then the boy would not be able to do anything to him. The leader pulled out a gun, took aim, and shot Okita in the back.